roommate wrote fan fiction about me and posted it online. So my roommate Ethan apparently thinks I'm the perfect protagonist for his extremely graphic fan fiction and decided to share this masterpiece with our mutual friend Brianna, who immediately told me I needed to see what he'd written about me because it was deeply concerning. I live with Ethan and Brianna in this 3-bedroom apartment near campus, and while Brianna and I became close friends pretty quickly, Ethan has always been socially awkward but harmless. Or at least that's what I thought until yesterday. Brianna found me in the kitchen making coffee and said we needed to talk privately. She looked genuinely disturbed and kept glancing toward Ethan's room to make sure he wasn't listening. She told me that Ethan had excitedly shown her some creative writing he'd been working on and asked for her feedback. But when she started reading, she realized it was extremely sexual fan fiction starring someone with my exact name, physical description, and personal details. Apparently, Ethan was proud of this story and had been posting chapters online for months, completely oblivious to how inappropriate and creepy the whole thing was. Brianna said she tried to tell him gently that maybe he shouldn't write about real people he knows, but Ethan just got defensive and said all writers draw inspiration from real life. I immediately went to my room and searched the fanfiction website Brianna mentioned. I found the story within minutes. It had over 1,800 views and detailed tags that made my stomach turn. The character wasn't just inspired by me, it was literally me, down to the scar on my left hand from a childhood accident and the way I tie my hair up when I'm studying. These were details that only someone living with me would notice. Ethan had included our university name, our apartment building, and even accurate descriptions of places around campus. Anyone from our school could potentially identify me. The worst part was reading the comments from strangers discussing this character, who was clearly me in ways that made me feel violated and exposed. I took screenshots of everything and immediately called my older brother, who's in law school, to ask about legal options for getting the story removed. My brother said that while it's creepy and inappropriate, it might not technically be illegal unless Ethan was making money from it or using actual photos, but I should definitely confront him directly. I spent the rest of the day feeling sick every time I looked at Ethan, wondering how long he'd been thinking about me this way and whether living with him was safe. That evening, when all three of us were in the common area, I decided to address it head on. I told Ethan I knew about the fanfiction and needed him to take it down immediately. Ethan's face went bright red, and he started stammering about creative freedom and how the character wasn't really me, just inspired by someone he knew. I pulled out my phone and read aloud some of the specific physical descriptions he'd written, watching his face get more mortified as he realized how obvious it was. Brianna backed me up, saying she'd tried to warn him that writing about roommates was crossing boundaries, but he hadn't listened. Ethan got defensive and said lots of authors base characters on real people and that I was overreacting to what was just creative expression. I told Ethan that creative expression doesn't include posting sexual content about identifiable real people online without their consent, especially when it includes enough personal details that classmates could recognize me. I explained that having strangers read graphic content about someone who looks exactly like me and lives where I live felt like a violation of my privacy and safety. Ethan seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset, which made the whole situation even more disturbing because he truly didn't understand how inappropriate his behavior was. I gave him 24 hours to delete the entire story from the website and any other platforms where he might have shared it, or I'd be talking to our resident advisor and potentially campus security. Ethan started crying and said he'd spent months working on the story and had built up a following of readers who were waiting for updates. I told Ethan that his hobby had crossed into harassment territory and that maintaining his readership wasn't more important than respecting his roommate's boundaries. Brianna said she'd help Ethan find other creative outlets that didn't involve writing sexual content about people he lives with. The next morning, Ethan knocked on my door looking exhausted and said he'd deleted the story and wanted to apologize for not understanding how his writing had affected me. He said he'd been so focused on the creative aspects that he hadn't considered the real-world impact on me as an actual person who has to live with the consequences. Ethan promised to stick to fictional characters going forward and asked if there was anything else he could do to make things right between us. I told Ethan I appreciated him taking the story down, but that rebuilding trust would take time, especially since he'd been writing about me for months without my knowledge. I also said he needed to understand that consent applies to more than just physical interactions. It includes how we represent other people in creative work, especially sexual content. Ethan also agreed to talk to the campus counseling center about understanding social boundaries better, which showed he was taking the situation seriously, and so far Ethan has kept his word about stopping. The whole experience taught me that even people who seem harmless can cross major boundaries if they don't understand basic concepts about consent and privacy. I'm glad I confronted the situation directly instead of just hoping it would go away, because Ethan genuinely didn't realize how inappropriate his behavior was.